The Edge is best thought of as a tweener vehicle. It slots between the Ford Escape and the Ford Explorer in terms of overall size. That means this is part of a relatively exclusive group of competitors because this size of two-row vehicle just isn't as popular as it once was. The big reasons you'd want a two-row crossover this size versus an Escape or a CR-V would be front and rear legroom. We get considerably more up front, considerably more in the back than you find in that compact crossover. You'll also find greater width across the rear bench seat, which means it's going to be more comfortable for larger people or 3 adults to sit across the back. Today's 3-row crossover really is the new minivan, and that's the prime reason you'd get this over something like a Ford Explorer, because this definitely has a sexier look on the side thanks to this sloping rear glass. Although we do have less cargo room in the back than your average 3-row crossover with the 3rd row folded flat, you'll find considerably more back here than you'll find behind your average 3rd row. The back of the Edge has also been redone for 2015. We get this integrated spoiler back here, and we get these new tail lamp modules with a LED strip that runs all the way around in a red ring. There are 3 different engines under the hood of the Edge. Things start out with a 2-liter turbocharged engine now, rather than a base V6 engine. This produces 245 horsepower and 275 pound-feet of torque. There is still an optional 3.5-liter V6 engine that bumps the horsepower up to 280, but the torque down to 250. It also drops your average fuel economy score from 24 miles per gallon for the front-wheel drive version down to 21 miles per gallon for the V6 front-wheel drive version. If you need more power, the Ford Edge Sport now uses a 2.7-liter twin-turbo V6 borrowed from the Ford F-150 and slightly detuned for sideways operation. That produces 315 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque. Fuel economy, interestingly enough, is exactly the same as the naturally aspirated V6 as long as you behave yourself. The really interesting twist for 2015 is that all-wheel drive is now optional on all models. That means that we can get all-wheel drive on the 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, but it also means that all-wheel drive is not standard on that high horsepower and high torque twin-turbo V6. We'll talk about this a little bit more in the drive section, but our model does have 245 55 R19 tires all the way around. These are relatively wide for this category, but they're also a little bit higher aspect ratio than some of the models out there. That helps improve the ride, and interestingly enough, does not take as big of a toll on the handling as I thought. Our titanium version of the Edge has very comfortable front seats. Now these are a hair below the Nissan Murano for my body shape, and a step behind the brand new Kia Sorento in top-line trim, because the Sorento does have more adjustable front seats with an adjustable thigh cushion and a 4-way adjustable lumbar support. Key difference in this interior versus the luxury entries would be the lack of wood trim in this interior, although I think in terms of parts quality and overall interior feel, this compares very well to the Lexus RX. This front seat was very comfortably adjusted for me at 6 feet tall. I have about 5 or 6 inches of legroom left there. You can very easily slouch or, of course, recline the rear seats because we do get reclining rear seats. We also have a much wider bench than you'll find in your average 2-row crossover. It means it's easier to put child seats in the back or larger adults. Unlike most of the 2-row crossovers, you'll also notice that parts quality does not decline as we go to the rear, so we still get soft touch plastics up here, soft touch armrest, and then hard plastics lower in the door. And of course, we have the other reason to get a large 2-row crossover, and that is a much larger trunk than you'll find in your average 2-row crossover. This is a 26-inch roller bag over here on this size. This is a 24-inch roller bag. I can roll it along over there, place it right behind that in that fashion, and still close the cargo area. We get between 33 and 50% more cargo space right back here than you'll find in something like a CR-V or RAV4. Out on the road, the Edge really surprised me because this is a nearly 4,000-pound SUV in this front-wheel drive 2-liter turbocharged form, but it really handles awfully well. You can thank the wide tires and the excellently tuned suspension for that. Now, something like a Kia Sorento or a Hyundai Santa Fe Sport will handle better than this depending on the version that you get, largely because they're lighter and their suspensions are tuned towards the slightly firmer side. Also very well designed, but definitely slightly sportier than this. Of course, if you wanted the sportier entry in this segment, that would be the Edge Sport, which does slot 1 notch below the Jeep Grand Cherokee SRT. The Jeep Grand Cherokee SRT really is in a class all by itself. It's trying to be the Jeep version of a BMW X5M or X6M, so it doesn't really compete with the Edge in any way. Acceleration in this 2-liter turbocharged version that we're taking a look at here came in at 7.5 seconds 0 to 60, which is fairly good. This is only about a half second slower than Nissan's Murano. Even though that does have a V6 and a CVT, CVTs actually help improve acceleration. Acceleration in the V6 is going to be a hair better, but it's not going to be that much better because you are trading horsepower for torque, and this does have an incredible amount of low-end torque. It also means that the 2-liter turbocharged version is going to be shifting an awful lot less to climb up hills. The two best things about the Edge out on the road, however, are the ride and the cabin noise. This cabin is incredibly quiet. In fact, this cabin is quieter than the last RX 350 that I tested. The most surprising thing about the ride in the Edge, however, is that even though this does have a very supple ride, it doesn't affect the handling as much as I thought it would. Admittedly, we do get a decent amount of body roll and pitch and dive in this vehicle, but when you really start pushing it hard in the corners, the Edge can dance better than you think. Fuel economy is probably the big win in the Edge, however. This 2-liter Ecoboost engine and the 2.7-liter Ecoboost engines are my engine of choice. The 2-liter Ecoboost gives you that 0 to 60 in 7.5 seconds, but also averages 24 miles per gallon fairly easily in this front-wheel drive version. Now, of course, the more city driving you do, the worse that number will look because we don't get any kind of idle start-stop system in this particular vehicle, and of course it's not a hybrid. So your fuel economy ratings will drop severely if you do a lot of city driving. Conversely, if you do a lot of highway driving, you can expect well over 30 miles per gallon, especially on level highway. The 2.7-liter twin-turbo engine, as long as you treat it very gently, will give you similar fuel economy to the other V6 entries in this segment, but you get considerably more power. Even if you're living in California or a southern state, the most important thing you need to know about the Edge is you really do want the all-wheel drive system. The reason for that is we have a surprising amount of torque steer in this vehicle thanks to the incredible amount of low-end torque we get out of this 2-liter turbocharged engine. Personally, I find the management of torque steer to be a hoot and a half, but if you don't like it, and there are a lot of people like that out there, then you really want to take a look at that all-wheel drive system, again, especially in the Sport model. Now, interestingly enough, the 3.5-liter V6 engine doesn't seem to have the same kind of torque steer problems that we do get in this or in the 2.7-liter twin turbo, but of course that's because its torque happens an awful lot later than this 2.0-liter turbo, and you get less of it. Pricing for 2015 puts the Edge right in the middle of the pack. It starts at $28,100 for the SE 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine and front-wheel drive. It tops out right around $43,340 for the all-wheel drive 3.5-liter V6. Now, if you want the 2.7-liter twin-turbo V6, that will cost a little bit more, but it's a very different vehicle than what we've been looking at right here. The Edge Sport is not a hardcore sports crossover vehicle. The best way to explain the Ford Edge would be that it's the crossover version of the Ford Taurus SHO. I think that description works really well because it's still very comfortable, it's still a crossover, it's still softer than an all-outright performance vehicle would be, but it's very, very livable. The Edge manages to be a little bit more expensive than the Nissan Murano. Of course, the Murano does get a V6 standard, but it is a decent amount more than the Hyundai Santa Fe Sport. Now, that's largely because the Santa Fe Sport starts with a 2.4-liter naturally aspirated engine that's significantly slower than the model we've been looking at. If you want the 2-liter turbocharged engine in your Santa Fe Sport, it will cost more than a base Ford Edge, but you do get some additional feature content. Jeep's Grand Cherokee is a very different kind of vehicle. It has a more off-road dedicated mission in mind. It's rear-wheel drive. It comes with an 8-speed automatic transmission. There are 2 optional V8 engines and an optional diesel as well. It's just not the same kind of vehicle as the Edge. If you're after the value proposition, that would be when you compare this to the Lexus RX 350. Of course, the RX really ought to be compared to the Lincoln MKX because they're both luxury vehicles. But actually, I think that the interior of the Lexus RX 350 really is not that big of a step above the Edge aside from the real wood trim, and I don't think that the RX 350 in its current version is worth the $12,800 price bump over the Ford Edge. Now, of course, we haven't looked at the 2016 Lexus RX 350, and we will be doing that in about a month, so be sure and subscribe to this channel and check out that video when it comes down. The biggest direct competitor to the Edge in my mind really is the brand new 2016 Kia Sorento. The Sorento also doesn't compare directly in some versions to the Ford Edge because it's available as a 5-passenger vehicle and as a 3-row 7-passenger vehicle. However, because we are looking at the 2-liter turbocharged version of the Edge, the Sorento does compare, because the 2-liter turbocharged engine comes as a 5-passenger version, and if you want the 6-cylinder engine, then you have to get the 7-passenger version. The Sorento and the Edge compare very well with one another. While this ends up being a $1,000 to $3,000 value over the Nissan Murano, and my choice over the Murano, the Sorento is actually the top choice for me in this segment. Although depending on how you configure it, the Sorento can be about the same price or more expensive than an Edge. You get more feature content in the Sorento than we get in this Ford. At the top end trims, you'll also find things like radar cruise control, a partial LCD instrument cluster that's more attractive than we find here, and a more adjustable driver's seat. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, thetruthaboutcars.com, and this has been the 2015 Edge. Go ahead and click that subscribe button at the top of your screen, and I'll see you next week.